Hey there, my name's Alex, I am the Silvermont. A while back, people had been asking me my opinions on Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, so I made a video listing my concerns. Turns out, that wasn't really what people were hoping for, or wanted, or liked. And I get that. If you're hyped for something, you don't want to hear someone else say it doesn't look that interesting to me? People like positive reinforcement. Granted, I stand by the majority of my concerns regarding the game, but some people did raise good points. I did, in that video, focus too much on the negative or at least neutral aspects, which is entirely fair that people brought up those complaints. It was a bit one-sided. I only talked about my concerns, I didn't talk about what I thought looked good? So in general, whilst I am not super hyped for Sekiro, I don't think it looks like a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I do think it looks good. But having realistic concerns is likewise fine and healthy. If you go into something wanting it to be bad, then of course that will colour your experience. That is not what I'm doing with Sekiro. I don't want to dislike it. Not sure why some people think that. It doesn't benefit me at all if the game is bad, It benefits me if the game is great, and that's what I'm hoping it's going to be. But for this video, I'll focus on some of the more positive aspects, things about Sekiro that I am interested in, or that look like a step in the right direction. Well, for starters, no, I can't pronounce the name of the game, sorry. But no, I'm interested in seeing them tackle a game with more verticality. Whilst in, say, Dark Souls, you are going from Anor Londo to Ash Lake, your actual movement is rather stiff. Yes, you are going from up to down, but it's not like you can climb ledges or anything like that, In Demon's Souls, there were a few ledges we could hop on, and then in Dark Souls 2, one of the biggest barriers in the entire game was a waist-high rock that a child could climb, but for some reason we needed to destroy all 4 of the Great Lord Soul dudes, which made complete sense, I guess. The levels in these games have always been amazing to look at, but moving around them never felt too organic from a gameplay sense. The level design themselves is usually good, it's layered and it's complex, and they are small areas but very richly detailed and intricate with many interlinked paths and so forth. But there were a lot of times where progress was blocked by like a 2-foot high ledge, which could be a bit silly at times. Now, in Sekiro, we have options of grappling hooks and climbing walls, which, whilst it sounds simple, it will alter the way you traverse levels by a significant degree. Even though, this is a very minor gripe I have, you can only use the grappling hook on specific points where it wants you to grapple. I kinda wish they would have allowed us complete freedom, but I understand why they haven't, because that allows us to break the game by going places they really don't want us to go. If there is one area I have no concerns, it is the level design. For the most part, they always deliver. So I'm eager to see how they work in level design into a game with more traversal options, namely grappling hooks, and also in the sense that stealth is now factored in to the gameplay. How is that going to affect the level design? Well, we'll find out. Creature design is another point. I won't go into too much detail in case you're, as I am, largely doing avoiding videos so you don't get spoiled on bosses and enemies. But I think it's very reasonable to expect some great monster designs in this game. Maybe they'll have a monster that just goes around eating birds that are making stupid noises when you're trying to record videos. I'd pay $5 for that as a DLC. I have mentioned how the Japanese setting is not my favourite, which it isn't, but that's more from a story and thematic sense. For monster designs, sure, you can have a lot of really interesting things to draw on in Japanese mythology, and I'm sure this is an opinion that will get me a bit of flack, but that was something I wasn't super keen on in Bloodborne. I thought a lot of the monsters were simply too grotesque. I know it's a horror-themed game, but a lot of their designs just seemed too visually complex with too much going on for my tastes in Bloodborne, and I fully understand that that was most likely intentional, because if you compare with Dark Souls 3, which, came after Bloodborne, it's a bit different, and these sort of eldritch monsters, they're meant to look incomprehensible in ways, which, sure, I get that. A lot of the beasts and bosses, I didn't like how they looked. It was so busy, there was so much visual information that they just kind of almost hurt to look at for me. And specifically there, I mean things like Bloodstarved Beast, Dark Beast Parl, Amelia, those kind of enemies. Things like, say the Orphan of Kos, I thought that was great. It was a simple design. In 5 seconds of looking at Orphan of Kos, if not the first second, you get instantly what the theme is of that boss. And I think that's good. If you can instantly tell what they're going for, I approve. From what I've seen of Sekiro so far, however, the enemy and boss design seems to be some of the best I've seen from the studio. That's just going by their visuals. I don't know how they're going to be to fight against, but I'm hopeful on one very specific point. I've always thought that giant bosses in Dark Souls were a little underwhelming, as you quite often stand there beating their toes until they die or fall over and let you clobber them in the head. Sekiro's emphasis on verticality and the posture-based combat with special attacks, I could see giant or large enemies being a lot more satisfying to fight, not to mention for others to watch you fight. That's purely speculation, as I've not seen any footage of giant monster fights, but I'm hopeful, and I trust them enough to put in these mechanics and actually use them. I still have my concerns on the stealth element and the combat, but that doesn't mean I think the combat is going to be bad. From what I've seen, it looks like it could have a satisfying flow to it. I believe some people might have slightly misunderstood my meaning there. When I replay Dark Souls, it is because the game has so many weapons and armors and builds to try out, or for multiplayer. When I replay Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry, it's for the depth of the combat, usually. Sometimes it's story, but meh. And I'm wondering if Sekiro is going to have that level of depth. How many different ways have I said it? Well, why am I concerned there about the combat, not my pronunciation? Because the last time From put out an action game, like a purely action game, it was Ninja Blade, which isn't fantastic. There's a Let's Play of it up on my channel if you want to check it out. Of course, Ninja Blade came out like 10 years ago, before From found their global success with Dark Souls, and their mini-global success with Demon Souls before that. This was during the age of quick-time event dominance. Sekiro isn't so heavily relying on QTEs. The combat instead uses a system of effectively breaking an enemy's guard to set them up for a critical hit that deals a large amount of damage. Every time you are striking at an enemy in the game, you're going to be building up like a meter. You know how in Dark Souls, if you have a bleed weapon, you hit an enemy and it builds up the bleed bar? Well, in Sekiro it's a posture bar. You build it up, when it happens, you essentially break their posture, their guard, and you can do a critical attack on them for a very large amount of damage. I like how when attacks are blocked, it's a more realistic and stylish looking animation of an actual sort of parry. If you are blocking a sword with another sword, the way it happens in Dark Souls always looked very awkward with how they just sort of ping off of each other. Now, in this game, the blades turn in a more realistic fashion. If you're blocking a sword with another sword, realistically, you're not just going to shove it in the way, you're going to angle your own weapon to deflect and parry, and that's kind of what they're going for here, and it looks really cool. You know, to some extent, I feel like God of War 2018 is a good comparison here, which probably made you go, what? What I mean there is that God of War 2018 is a game I played through, and I really enjoyed it, see my review. The combat was absolutely fine, I enjoyed the combat. However, there wasn't so much depth to that combat that it made me want to go and play the game again, you know? What this all boils down to is replay value. Will Sekiro have it? To some extent that's obviously subjective, but ultimately that was my main concern. Now, because the game has no multiplayer and whatnot, does that mean we'll instead have all that focus honed into a laser accurate and precise edge to give us a polished diamond of a game. Whereas Dark Souls is a larger diamond for sure, but it is rough, it is coarse, it is not all that polished. And I'm not knocking Sekiro for lacking multiplayer. A game doesn't need that for replay value. Again, see Ninja Gaiden. I'm just curious where it may lie with this game. And again, going back to God of War, even if I feel no compulsion to play through the game multiple times, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. I don't regret buying God of War at full price at launch, playing it once and then being like, okay, I'm done with this. And another thing I didn't touch on, the graphics and visuals. The videos thus far seem to be mostly 60 FPS, which is a good sign. There's been some that I think might be PS4 and looked maybe like 30 FPS. I can't tell for certain. Hopefully 60 FPS is going to be on all platforms, whether baseline or enhanced. It's a nice looking game, but then FromSoft games almost always are really good looking since like Demon Souls, you know? They aren't the most technically amazing games, although, you know, they've definitely improved a lot over the years as they've, I assume, had more money to put into technical aspects and making their own engines or whatever. Take Dark Souls as an example. There's no facial animation, the technical aspects of the game are quite simple. The character models look like they're made out of Play-Doh, but when you're armoured up and walking through the levels, the carefully handcrafted lighting of each area, the speculars and the complex detailed designs give you more immersion than you might get in something like, say, Battlefield, where the graphics are mind-blowing on a technical level and the performance is great, but I would argue there's no personality there. Of course, this does also involve performance, an area that From have struggled with in the past. Hopefully, Sekiro is going to run smoothly when it comes to frame rate. These demos are promising if you ask me. I don't see many hitches or dips. One aspect that From have excelled at in recent years if you ask me would be their cutscenes. Used sparingly, yet to great effect. There is a rather characteristic trend between them. And I don't know if this is a Miyazaki thing or someone else who works on all these cutscenes or what, but they are quite distinct to me, whether it's the moon presence descending, Ludwig ascending, or Gale harnessing the power of the Dark Soul. They have a very methodical pace to them, with slow, lingering shots. And I'm sure Sekiro is going to have some amazing scenes in it. It's going to be interesting getting that in a more traditionally told story. Whilst Bloodborne definitely used a Dark Souls-style storytelling format in many ways, Sekiro looks to be a more traditional fare to some extent, but I'm sure it will still have the same flair and feel in aspects of it, and I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. Now personally, I'm fine if they go as far away from Dark Souls as they can in every aspect. But look, I know what you're really wondering. Who is stronger? Sekiro, the one-armed wolf, or William Adams, the golden-haired samurai? What do they call him in the game? Kin no Samurai, something like that. I don't know, dude. Come back when I've beaten Sekiro and I make a video about that very topic for shits and giggles. Either way, thanks for watching. I am going to buy Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and I'm sure it's going to be a good game. Am I really hyped for it? No, but don't let that affect you. I'm not trying to be down on the game, that gains me nothing. I'm not trying to be controversial or contrarian. These are just my opinions and thoughts based on what I've seen. By all means, if you feel differently about the game, do let me know why. If you're going to spaz out because somebody has a different opinion to you on the internet, then maybe you should relax until you enter a coma instead. Then release your soul on a spiritual enterprise to seek enlightenment, so that you no longer get mad at other people's opinions on the internet. Once again though, thank you so much for watching. Not too long until Sekiro now, and then all our questions will be answered. I will probably review the game as soon as I am able. maybe even a Let's Play, who knows? Or put it on Twitch. There's so many options. Yeah, have a very nice day though, and I will catch you later.